I heard recently that if you walk into the scene, it grabs viewers' attention. Hey everyone, hope you're well. Nick here. I thought that it was about time I gave you all a little update. I don't really communicate as much as I used to, especially on social media. Why is that? Well, no real reason, just wanting to come on and have a little chat with you guys and give you some little points I was been thinking about recently. I guess sort of around COVID time I started to sort of stress less about doing so much social media. It can overwhelm you. It can get to a point where you're putting, obviously, social media, when you work alone as an individual business, it's important that you are available and that people know where to find you. But for me personally, as I became a bit more mature in my career and in the industry of dog behaviour and training, I thought, well, do I really need to be trying quite so hard all of the time? I'm approaching 60 now, and I've been at it for a long time, so it's all good. But I'm just saying, doing a bit less of that is good. I don't spend any time scrolling these days. I enjoy reading other people's posts. I like to see what other people are getting up to in the dog behaviour field, because that's still important to me. I continue to work. I'm out on the road consulting about 2 or 3 days a week. January so far has kicked off really well, and bookings are looking good into February and early March. If you haven't looked, I updated my website the latter part of last year. Have a look. It's alphadogbehaviour.co.uk. Somebody said to me the other day, "Oh, alpha, I'll use the word alpha. It's a bit sensitive these days, isn't it?" And I said, well, yeah, I can see that it is actually. But in fact, when I set up the business all those years ago, I largely, or part of the reason for choosing that word alpha, is that I was actually advertising in Yellow Pages print. And of course, the adverts were set alphabetically. So sure enough, I was coming up at the beginning of my classification, but also I liked the alpha kind of wolf connotation, and having that sort of broader understanding that there is a much bigger picture to living with dogs. And anyway, wolves and everything, it just appealed to me, and I was like, alpha dog behaviour. And it's just, of course, stuck, and I would be foolish, I think, to change it this far down the line. So just because I'm called Alpha Dog Behaviour, I've never made this point online. It's been in my mind for a few years, actually, to say something about it on record. So alpha doesn't mean that I'm purely into some sort of dominance theory as to how we manage dogs in our lives. Yes, some dogs can be dominant, and with some dogs we may need to be a little bit more dominant in ourselves with that dog, but that's purely on a case-by-case basis. I think you could ask virtually all of my customers and they will say that I would come in and be perfectly calm and relaxed. We're not putting dogs on their back in any sort of alpha roles or anything like that. So it's just a name. So yeah, we're off to a busy start in 2026, and my new website actually is helping ensure that business is just steady and that I'm doing the type of work that I want to do. What type of work is that? Well, I started with behaviour cases, and that's my passion. That's what I want to come back to, or I've never left it, but it's actually not too far into my career. I inadvertently started to assess dogs for the courts. And I guess, like anything, you do a few and actually think, well, I quite enjoy that. And that does have an interesting aspect to the job. And so I was assessing dogs under the Dangerous Dogs Act, either to establish whether they were a banned type or not. Or not just banned types, also just assessing dogs as to whether they would be fit to return to public, and what measures should be put in place for that to happen. So that was very good for me personally on a practitioner level, because I'm not just working with dogs in a domestic setting. I'm also seeing dogs out of a domestic setting that have allegedly bitten people. That's normally the rub, or the short version. And so, as I say, I enjoyed it, but I do want to sort of contract a little bit and focus on behaviour cases. I was having this very conversation yesterday, because when I focus, it allows me to go deeper on an individual case-by-case basis, rather than me feeling as though I'm sort of chasing around doing the next job and the next job, and not really slowing down and taking enough time and attention in addressing each case. I'd like to think that each case in the past was given due care and attention. It's a funny term, but you know what I mean. But of course, the workload also results in a stress load as an individual. The job isn't free from stress, but I'm pleased to say for the best part it's extremely enjoyable and rewarding. Any very busy practitioner will be able to tell you about the stress load when working with dogs and owners. It's not that either of them are bad or unenjoyable, but if you care about the job, hence you get into the profession, then it isn't just a case of coming home and finishing and not thinking anything more of it. You know, the more of it you do, the more that load can build. And so anyway, it's nice to sort of be able to steer the business and the type of work I'm doing as I move into the sort of latter part of my career, you might say. So yes, I'm doing more local work. I'm based in Bewdley, Worcestershire. So certainly Worcestershire, Herefordshire, Shropshire. We have sort of the counties south of me as well, going down the M5, maybe down towards Somerset. I'm a Bristolian boy, so you might pick that up in my accent somewhere. But don't hold it against me. So yeah, everything's good. What prompted me to jump on, because I wanted to say, look, I don't share cases as much. Quite a lot of the work I do, I consider to be somewhat sensitive. I don't think it's appropriate. I'm often not in a good position either on a visit, especially it's only me there. I don't have an assistant or a helper to film what's going on. You know, some of the things that happen and that I see that are really impressive and wonderful, and I think, oh my God, that dog just did that. But for, you know, a good thing, but also sometimes I think, oh my God, that dog just did that. Oh, if that would have been caught on camera. So they're happening. It's just that I'm not documenting them, and I don't really feel that comfortable coming back to the office really explaining the ins and outs of what happened on that visit. You know, how is that going to make the owner feel? How would I feel if somebody was going back to the office and making a big splash on a social media case on you know, me and my dog? So I try to exercise a bit of sensitivity. Looking on from that though, I do still like the idea. I have a small YouTube channel. I've never really put direct effort into it, but because it's been running for a few years, I think it's without checking, I could joke here, but you know, I've got 8,365 subscribers, but it is something like 8.3 thousand. Okay, I'm not really worried about the subscriber numbers. The channel actually was monetized until about 6 months ago, when the lack of input from me actually unmonetized it. It just sort of falls off the page and you don't get paid for any views. In any event, I was never earning more than, let's say, 30 quid a month. So it was not a part of the business as I see it. But it could be. It could be an area, not in terms of making money, but in terms of sharing knowledge and being able to give ideas and some methods and systems that I've developed over the years. Pretty much 25 years I've been practicing as a full-time dog behaviourist, and throughout that period I've been out on the road virtually every day, and if I'm not on the road, I'm here in the office writing, taking calls, you know, planning for the next week ahead, that type of thing. Thankfully, actually, the business is as a model, it's quite simple to work. You know, have my website, people fill in the inquiry form, I receive an email, I send a response. Hopefully that rings true for the prospective customer. They write back going, oh yes please, when can we book you in? And I go along, I see them, I see the dog, we agree on what needs to be done and how we could go about it. And then I'm there in the background supporting and encouraging them, and returning invariably for a second visit about a month or 6 weeks later. So that's how that aspect seems to run. You know, it's a nice, simple-ish business to run, but it's very much a people-led and people-engaging business. Certainly one thing I've learned over the years is that support to customers on an ongoing basis is absolutely essential for a good outcome. You know, anybody can rock up for a single visit and say, oh, do this, do that, and then shake the hands, goodbye, see you later, send some notes, and it's done, isn't it? Done and dusted. And I quite often have heard in the past how that, I'm not talking about any practitioner in particular, I'm just talking in general, but then somehow some of those customers that are engaging with a trainer that works like that, nothing wrong with it, incidentally, it's, you know, horses for courses, but this is why I'm saying 2 visits are so helpful and powerful, because I get an opportunity to come back about 4 or 6 weeks later, and we sit down and we look at everything that's going well, and pats on the back and cups of tea and biscuits all round. But of course, what is important is that we stop and we focus constantly on what still needs addressing, what aspects are you still struggling with, and that we give those some due time and effort. So yeah, I think that's a sort of little roundup of where I am at the moment. I'm very keen to get this year moving. I'm looking forward to some brighter, warmer weather in the spring. And to, you know, get out on the road. I was thinking the other day how, actually I was listening to a video on YouTube, and these 2 guys on a podcast were talking about flow. What does that mean? It was really a mental flow, and the power of being in flow. And when we reach a state of flow or obtain a state of flow in a visit, for me, I'm thinking, when I'm talking to somebody and I know instinctively, intuitively, experientially, that I'm onto something, and that the penny is dropped, I understand what's happening, and that is such a nice feeling. And that only comes, for me, seriously in the latter years, because of course my flow is supported by past experience, and you can't rush that. You cannot rush experience. So it's a lovely thing to be able to be in an industry for that long, where you get to a point, not you understand that I'm saying I know exactly what I'm doing all of the time. There is still a great deal of learning to be had on the job. Every dog is different. You know, I still occasionally come away, and I do self debrief. I don't sit down and actually think the word debrief, but you know, naturally I come away and think, well, that went well, that didn't go so well, I could have done that differently, I shouldn't have done that, I could have done that. You know, not too hard on myself, but I do try to have some self-reflection, and I think that's important as well as a practitioner. And yeah, so having some sort of self-awareness, finding some flow on the visit, which is so enjoyable. And the point I really wanted to make there is that it's a bit addictive when you come away and you think, I bloomin' sorted that dog in 10 minutes today, honestly. And then I had to sort of figure out what to say for the next 2 hours, 50 minutes. Not that I time my visits, but they do actually vary. I was with a customer yesterday, started at 11 a.m. I was just leaving the house from the kitchen, and the owner said, oh, it's 2:20. And I said, well, that's about right. And I was literally leaving. And I said, actually, visits do tend to sort of average out about 3 hours. You know, I was with somebody the other day, 4 or so hours. So I have a set fee for my work. And then how long I'm with you really isn't on my mind. I just know that by the time I've done things, got through the list, I mean, I'm keen to have a list of concerns from the owner, and that we go through them methodically. So there you go. I told you it was just coming in and having a chat, having a little catch up. I just wanted to let you know I'm still here. if you would like to make an inquiry, you're very welcome to do that. If you log on to my contact form, and the website for that is alphadogbehaviour.co.uk/contact. Just thinking again about that alpha dog behaviour. So that's all good. Give me any ideas for YouTube. I've actually got quite a lot of my own, but they are a little bit sort of scattered in terms of how I could do it. What I did think of today was a bit random. I was just going through my presenter here that I take into every job, and actually look at it, it's getting a bit worn, and I was going through my internal pages here, which all have different sheets for all my work, okay? And I thought actually this would be quite nice to go through these sorts of things on for other practitioners, and that I could share those sorts of aspects in terms of how I run the business, you know, in a loose sense, from this idea of obtaining inquiries in the first place and then conveying them nicely, professionally, you know, through to the actual consultation and all the bits of paperwork and that. I like to keep things super simple, both in the way I run the business. I've got my computer here to the right, and, you know, a computer, a car, a few tools in the car. You don't really need much. The tools that are used in my car, quite honestly, is probably more my jack and changing the wheel than any other tools for dog behaviour. Okay, so that's a little thought for you there in terms of how we could sort of move it forward. Yeah, so I was thinking things like for practitioners, and I made a couple of notes, things like sharing my methods, my tools, the business practices. So I think that we could have like a little playlist in my YouTube channel with some thoughts along those lines. And you see, before I came into the dog behaviour industry, I was in the police for a couple of years, but it wasn't long enough to really even make me sort of go, yes, I used to be a policeman. It just isn't long enough in my view. But what I did do before the police was work in a sort of professional sales and marketing type career for about 10, 12 years. And so through that, I actually spent a lot of time learning how to communicate. I'm not saying I'm a perfect communicator, but I try my best, and I enjoy communicating with people. So it's a perfect job for me. So long may it continue. Here's to what will, all being well, be a great rest of the year. And if I can help any of you in any way, let me know. I like to think that I support people within the industry doing similar work to myself, as well as dog owners. You know, I try not to spread myself too thinly these days, but if somebody wants to speak to me, I will never say no. Okay, so on that note, I wish you all the very best for this year. Thank you for being there. I try not to pester you too much with look at what I'm doing and look at this Malinois I saw last week. You know, it's more like in my job, here's the cockapoo I saw last week, or here's the spaniel I see last week, the German shepherd, you know. So I tend to see, as you might imagine, dogs that are I see in proportion to the dogs that are out there in the UK. So if we had a little snapshot of the 10 most popular breeds, because people do say to me, you know, what breed do you see the most? And the answer to that is what I'm saying now. So if, let's say, we looked at the 10 top popular breeds in the UK, I would quite often see them in a similar ratio to that list, if that makes sense. Okay. So yeah, thanks again, and I'll catch you all soon. Bye for now.